that's what really reflects success. Being passionate about your mission, your vision about doing it. Because don't just start off with consulting. Think about a product, a license.
Well, consulting can be a good way to start, though, because if you're trying to bootstrap from nothing and you have nothing to sell, you can sell yourself.
Yeah.
You just got to be careful that you're not selling yourself so... Shut up. You know what I mean? You got to make sure you're not selling so much of your time, though, that you don't have time to go off and build your products and things that you're trying to build ultimately.
Right. That's a hard balance to strike.
It's a really hard balance sometimes to strike.
I'm not saying don't consult. I'm just saying don't fall into the trap of just being consultant.
Well, yeah, you're kind of touching on, and sort of this whole panel came out of the idea of give a lesson or give something back that you've learned that you would never do again, right? And so maybe Eugene and Paul, having some of the most experience here, you know, what's one thing that you would never do again, or that you did that would?
I think maybe two comments. One, to pick up on this point about consulting versus product sales. Another way to think of it is that not all revenue is created equal. If you have a company that generates $1 million a year of top-line revenue, there's a big difference in the value of that company. If that's consulting revenue, where you've got 5 people that are just being billed out at 100% of their time, or $1 million of a security product that is being sold as a shrink-wrap, ready product. And just to give you an example, if that company were to be acquired by a big player, they look at a product company. They could easily pay 20 times revenue. They could pay $20 million for that company, and that would be considered normal in the security space. On the other hand, a consulting company is worth maybe 1/2 that. Maybe it's 1.5 times the revenue, maybe it's 1 times revenue. If it's a really special consulting company, maybe it's 2x revenue. So maybe it's worth, somewhere between $500,000 and $2 million. Why? Because when I sat as an executive at IBM, we generated, $45, $50 billion a year of consulting revenue. So, and it was pretty well understood how to generate more. Another $1 million or $10 million of consulting revenue is completely irrelevant. Whereas if you looked at a product and it was successful with a small channel, you could say, wow, we could take this $1 million product, add it to our sales force, and this could turn into $50, $100, $500 million a year in a couple of years. And so that's something that gets lost sometimes, is that not all dollars are the same when it comes to how venture capitalists or acquirers look at a company. And then so that's one important lesson. In the early days of bootstrapping, that was something I really had to understand, that even though I was generating revenue through other activities, people didn't really see any value in it because it wasn't related to the core mission of the company. Mm-hmm. And then the second thing is team is really critical. And when it comes to executive hiring, not co-founders, certainly made some mistakes, and that's something I'm never going to do again, is you be very, very rigid about referencing. If you're not sure, just don't hire somebody. No matter how much excitement there is about filling a particular slot, just take your time, because it takes a very long time to recover from that and to fix mistakes, and it kind of generates a lot of worries and pains that you don't need to have.
I mean, from my perspective, I tend to have more of an operations background or focus at the moment. But the lessons I've learned is invoice. It might be more exciting to talk to the client or develop something, but once you can invoice, cash flow is so bloody important.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds stupid, but, and this is probably an important thing, is you have to work on your strengths. If you're a technical person who doesn't have that business spark, don't try and be that person. Get somebody in. If you're starting a business by yourself, get somebody to do it first. Don't let the expenses get on top of you, because the work of having to backfill all your receipts and work out what it does and all that junk, if you think it's junk, get somebody else to do it, because it's really painful if you don't do that. So my side is the boring side, which is the reason you're in business. You could be in business for passion, but most of all you want to be in business so you can earn a nice revenue income. The passion helps, but money is useful. I don't know why, but it is bloody useful. Yeah.
For me, some of my things you're saying is really ringing true, because I was part of a small startup with a good friend of mine, but I was also a lot member until maybe 3 months before at stake in a lot. And I January this year was a big anniversary for me, because that was 10 years since. So on a very personal level, I'd like to hear a lot of what I can say about the lessons But also, I want to hear more about the uses of the small startup and the relationship aspect, because in my own startup, that really was what it meant.
I think that's about the most loaded question you could possibly have asked. So do you have any specific area of that you want to hear about? Because I could go on for about 2 hours about that.
I suppose really the aspects that you touched on, the interrelationship, the issues of the bottom line versus the funding.
All right, so why don't...
Value versus value.
All right, so this is being recorded, isn't it? Right. All right, so why don't I just do a little brain dump? So AtStake was initially founded by VCs. I was actually working for another startup when I first heard about it, before it was called AtStake and before the Loft was involved. So I was kind of cursorily aware of what was going on. And the day I showed up, I found out, oh, the Loft just joined. I was like, cool. So I got to meet all those guys. And so just as kind of an interesting aspect of what happened there, we got in over time. You know, initially it was like $10 million of funding, but by the time we were done, it was $50 million of funding. So lesson learned there, never invest $50 million in a services company. Not a good model. We got bought for $50 million, so that was a push. So I think some of the lessons that I would pull from that were we should have done something around products. We had all these great researchers that we were not utilizing well, because they were doing all cool research projects, but I don't think we did a really good job of leveraging that into products that we could sell very much. And there was a few things, but there should have been a lot more of that. And there should have been a lot more of taking what they were doing and directly leveraging it in the consulting field, because there was a kind of a pretty interesting dichotomy between the two groups. There was the researchers, and then there was us consultants. And we talked a lot. You know, I hung out with those guys a lot and did a lot of work with them, and that's how I ended up doing Loftcraft and some of that kind of stuff. But the main thing, I guess, is if you're going to hire a bunch of expensive resources, make sure you're leveraging them in the best way possible. Otherwise, it's just a waste of money.
So generate a product from a consultant.
Generate a product from. I mean, having them from a promotional and PR point of view was probably the best thing we possibly could have done. But I just think we could have gotten so much more out of that acquisition.
Okay. Well, I want to come back to this. I don't want
to hijack the.
Rafi, But Rafi, like one thing that you would either never do again or would definitely do again?
It's hard. It's still very young, but I think what I've seen so far, what we've done, we tried to align ourselves with the best out there. So, for example, very early on in September, we were going to incorporate. Big deal, right? I mean, it's not that hard to form a C corporation and register in Delaware and do all this stuff. But there is actually quite a pile of documents you should have, especially if you go down the route of getting VC money. But even otherwise, you just want to have these things done right. So what we did is we ran up and down the Silicon Valley and we interviewed for lawyers. We went out to friends, said, hey, who do you know that's a corporate attorney that would help us incorporate? Some people are like, this is insane, why would we do that? But we talked to the first guy in the morning. Great guy. We loved him. We're like, this is cool. This guy is probably the guy that we're going to end up with. Second guy, not so much. I didn't like him that much. Too corporate-y. Wasn't that cool. Like, okay, next. Next guy, super cool. Even better than the first one. We're like, this is it. We go to the fourth guy. This guy blew everyone else out of the water. We ended up going with him. And he's really a rock star. But I'm now confident that he is the best we could have gotten. Or definitely one of the best. And it's been worth it. Although he wasn't much more expensive than all the others. But he has so much experience in this field. Just this year alone, he already did 30 financings. So that tells me this guy knows what he's talking about. If I go to him with a problem, he knows what to do. He knows how to read our term sheets, and he knows what's common practice. He doesn't just know the law, but he also knows what's going through. He knows the VCs. He knows where he can push and where we shouldn't push. And I think that I will try to repeat that wherever we go, that we work with the best out there, even if they are slightly more expensive. In the end, it's going to be worth it.
Sure. Doesn't that bring up the issue of the other thing you need, mentors?
Yes. And I think mentors is an incredibly important topic. Last year actually at Source, I was running around with this idea of starting this visualization service in the cloud, and